What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back for another Bitcoin analysis on a beautiful day. Everything green across the board. Of course, massive news coming yesterday. President Trump tweeting again, telling us that it's a great time to buy. And of course, also we heard that the tariffs are being paused or halted for 90 days while China is getting 125% tariffs on top now. So since the tariffs have been halted, the markets have reacted accordingly, and we saw a massive pump across the board, not just for Bitcoin and crypto, but also for traditional markets. So we'll be looking at all of that from a chart perspective. Now, of course, we go into the smaller time frames, 2-hourly chart. There we see a massive bull flag forming, as well as the 4-hourly chart. Then we see on the larger time frames, such as the daily chart and the 3-day chart, that there's still massive resistance ahead of us, and that we're very close as well to closing the CME gap that's still left open for Bitcoin. So a lot of stuff to cover, guys, and as always, make sure to follow me over on X as well. This is where you get the fastest updates all around the clock, and of course this morning I already updated you on most of these charts. So if you don't want to wait for new YouTube videos to come out, then make sure to follow over there to get the updates all around the clock. Right, guys, let's go straight into the charts now and look at the smaller time frames here and see exactly what happened since my video yesterday. Of course, the key levels that we spoke about here that you can see circled came into play massively. We saw that we had to break yesterday when we spoke, we had to break this level right here. You see this orange line here. This is where we wanted to reclaim the range of the previous closing low right here, right at 78,400 here on a 2-hourly closing basis. And of course, Bitcoin marched straight through that, didn't even get any resistance there really, because of the massive news, and then continued upwards to another key level that of course we spoke about here in the 83 to 84k range, found resistance there, and is now consolidating at the key area that we've been speaking about for the last couple of weeks as our key range support here, after we lost the heights here of 87 and 89k, where I told you guys that it's unlikely that we find support in the 84k area, and that the most likely bottom for this correction would have been 81 to 81.3k. And this, of course, then happened to be the exact area where Bitcoin tried to find support and also tried to rally back up from there. We can see here that Bitcoin found a bounce there and then rallied up back towards 89k. But eventually we lost that level then. It's where I told you guys on a 2-hourly closing basis, when we start Bitcoin right here with this candle, start closing below this and trading below the previous lows, that it's likely that we go revisit the lows in the 76k range. But my bias was that we're going down lower than that, towards 74 and 72k. And of course, guys, we ended up going down exactly to that area and found a bounce right at 74,400. That has, of course, been our target here on the channel since I've been posting back in January. And I told you guys that if Bitcoin loses the 90 to 92k support area or starts closing within that range and not picking up demand there and bouncing straight from it as it has done when it printed the previous 2 all-time highs, then that it's likely that we're coming down to these price targets. So we're in a key area right now where Bitcoin could still move slightly lower, but if we can reclaim all this above here, especially on a larger time frame closing basis, then it becomes massive for the bulls and a continuation of the bull market, and the broader uptrend is very, very likely. So here we have it now, guys. Now we're sitting back above this key level that we spoke about yesterday. Here's where we wanted to see the break above, out of this downtrend here where we found confluence between key Fibonacci levels, previous range support, and the resistance line from the local downtrend. The moment Bitcoin got above there, of course, it went straight up here and is now consolidating on our key level that we said is the next step for us for Bitcoin to find support again, to indicate that the continuation of the uptrend here is continuing, at least on the smaller time frames, right? And this is the next step here now. You can see it here very clearly, this area above. Actually, let's look at it on the 4-hourly chart. That's easier to see, right? There we can see the entire range. And there we see that this area right up here, right at 84.5, 84.6 has been massive resistance. And every time Bitcoin actually got above there on a closing basis, it ended up going towards 87 and 89k here, without exceptions. So of course, that is a massive resistance area here from that perspective, but it becomes even clearer when we look at it now in a second on the daily and on the larger time frames. So this is the next step here. We want to find a bounce here in this area. And then also you got to keep an eye on the Fibonacci retracement here, of course, coming from the swing low to the current swing high. If this correction here from this breakout continues, then of course the key level is always the 38.2 for a bullish bounce there, right? The deeper the retracement goes, the weaker the bounce usually becomes. And then of course we get a lot of stuff that is now support turns back into resistance. And therefore we see the prior high here in this local downtrend. That lines up perfectly with the 38.2. So this is a key level for Bitcoin to hold here, especially on a closing basis, to confirm it as support and to continue upwards here to test the key area of 83 to 84k again. And then you look here exactly at 84,500. That is our current resistance here. That then also plays a big role on the larger time frames. We'll see that here now on the daily chart. You can see right up here, 84,300 to 85,200. That is the key area. So what do we see here? Previously, 84,200 has been massive support and resistance throughout the entire range right down here, right? You can see this. And then above there, we can see the moving average as well. This is the 50-day SMA, which in this downtrend has been massive resistance as well. So that all aligns here in that key area, as well as the trend line that has been holding the price down ever since the 109k top here. So this area up here, right between 84,200 and 85,200, represents massive resistance, but then still we have more work ahead right above there. You can see this massive trend line here connecting the tops here throughout the entire downtrend, and then right there, just above there, we can see the previous high here in this downtrend, right? We see a low here, this is the high, and then we want to get back above there, right above 87,500 on a daily closing basis to really confirm the breakout out of the downtrend here. Of course, by definition, a trend reversal is, in this case, starting to print higher highs. Of course, this downtrend here consists of lower highs and lower lows, and therefore, to get a trend reversal, we want to see higher highs, and for that, we need to break the previous high here on a closing basis right above 87,500, and overall on a trading basis right above 88,900. So these are the key price targets here on a daily closing basis and trading basis that you want to see the Bitcoin price above to confirm this breakout here. And just above there, then we can see this key area here between 92k and 90k basically, where Bitcoin has been picking up massive demand from to print multiple all-time highs, right? This is the key area where I told you guys, if we start closing within this range, then it's likely that we go down to 74 and 72k. And this is something we spoke about when Bitcoin was still trading between 95 and 100k right up here in this range. And this is the moment where Bitcoin did not pick up massive demand. It started closing within the range, and then we broke down from there. Of course, we're still looking at this as a correction and not as the beginning of the bear market, since we're still trading above key moving averages on the larger time frame, such as the weekly chart, and a lot of stuff that we looked at previously, as well as on the Bitcoin dominance chart, on the M2 money supply, and so on, is still in play and still pointing towards a continuation of the bull market for Bitcoin. So keep that in mind. This is key resistance here, right between 84,200 and 85,200. And then to confirm it here on a daily closing basis, 87,500 is the key number. If we find a rejection now in this key area here between 84 and 85k and can confirm the breakout, then of course the target remains this key area here between 74 and 72k. And that becomes very clear here in a second as well on the 3-day chart. And then here, if you look, you can also see very clearly the importance of the level right around 81,200, the amount of touch points we had there between 81.5 and 81.2, a key support level here. And that, of course, massive that Bitcoin now broke back above it here and is trying to confirm it as support. And then, of course, a drop below there, especially on a closing basis, would give a clear confirmation that the price is going to revisit at least the lows, but most likely coming down here into this area. Now we look at the 3-day chart, that becomes very, very clear here. Here the levels and the ranges are much clearer than all the wicks and everything that you see on the smaller time frames, of course. And here it becomes very clear why the 87k area is still the pivot point, right? We can see here, this was the candle that a lot of people look at on the daily chart, the 85k top, right, on a closing basis as the pivot point. But it doesn't make sense here. You can see that it's a clear fake out and the close is just above 83k. The actual prior high here, if you look at it from a trend perspective, we can see a high here, another high here, and then another high here. And on a closing basis, it's right at 87,500, right? This is what you want to see the Bitcoin price back above here on a 3-day closing basis to confirm a trend reversal. And then to the downside, of course, we're still holding the previous range closing low and the key moving average that, of course, has been massive support not only throughout this cycle, but in general for Bitcoin in bull markets, right? We can see all the touch points that we spoke about in yesterday's video here, and we're in a very similar spot again like we were in the range before here. That, of course, now is the likely target still, as long as Bitcoin is trading within this downtrend here. You can see we find the rejection here in this area now. Then, of course, the likely target here very obviously becomes this box here, and that then, of course, perfectly aligns here as well with the trend line, the support line of the falling wedge. Right, guys, and we can still look at the weekly chart here as well. There we see that we're in a very nice spot as well. From the moving average perspective, Bitcoin, of course, threw a massive shadow below the 50-week SMA, but then bounced massively the way exactly we predicted it I told you guys that when Bitcoin starts approaching the 50-week SMA, the likely scenario is that we shoot a massive wick down into the 74 and 72K range and then find a big bounce from there. And this is what happened now. You can see Bitcoin is still, the bodies are clearly above the 50-week SMA. And that, of course, is very important for the continuation of the bull market, as every single time, I mean, we broke it down a million times now, guys, but every single time Bitcoin ended up closing below the 50-week SMA after putting in a new all-time high, Bitcoin ended up going down to its bear market lows. So the key thing here still is, even if we go lower down here into the 73 to 72K range, right, then the key thing is that we pick up massive demand there, bounce, and continue closing above the 50-week SMA. So just because we close this candle above here now does not mean that Bitcoin can't go any lower, right? For that, to confirm this low here, we're still looking for the same thing that we just saw on the daily chart, the 3-day chart, and the smaller time frames. We need to break the previous high in this downtrend. And here on a weekly closing basis, you can see that it's right around 86,200. That's what you want to see the weekly to close above here to confirm a breakout out of the downtrend. And that, of course, aligns perfectly here as well with the smaller Fibonacci retracement coming from the previous range lows right around 49K to our current top at 109K. So there you see that that's the 38.2 there, the key level of the Fibonacci retracement, in perfect alignment with the previous highs on a closing basis. And therefore, the logical target to close back above here for the weekly candle to confirm that then, of course, a move towards the 92 to 93K range is in the pipeline. And there you see it very clearly here, right around 93,600 on a weekly closing basis would confirm it then that we're going back up to challenge the previous all-time highs and then most likely to break them and print our cycle top. Right, guys, and now we got to wrap things up on the CME chart, and there, of course, we find strong confluence as well with the resistance levels that we saw on the smaller time frames in the 84 to 85K range, right? And there we see here where the gap is. I've seen a lot of people making mistakes on identifying the CME gaps by just drawing them wrong, right? You have to look at Friday and Monday, of course, but what's important is that you need to know where to draw the gap from. And we always look at the closing price on Friday and the opening price on Monday. So if we look at this gap right now, this is a bullish candle here. So this is the open of the candle, the open on Friday, which would make sense because we had a whole trading day before it closed. So we need to look at the closing price on Friday since there's no CME trading across the weekend. The last place where Bitcoin was when the candle closed on Friday. And that is right up here, in this case, 84,325. And then we need to look at the open price on Monday. And there we look at the next candle, of course, which is this one here, Monday. And there we need to look at the open price. This being a bearish candle, we can see that it's at the top of the body here, right at 79,590. And therefore, this is the gap, 79,590 to 84,325. And as we can see, the gap has not been closed yet. There's still room to the upside, just like there is to find the key resistance across the board for Bitcoin on the smaller time frames. So that as well here aligns perfectly. And of course, guys, I already updated you guys on this here on X as well. So always make sure to follow me over here to get all the updates around the clock. And this is the easiest way to stay up to date with my analysis, guys. Right, guys, that's it for me for today. I think I have it all covered, and the key levels that we need to look at here, not only today, but also probably tomorrow and throughout the weekend, are very, very clear to the upside and to the downside. And not much has changed. Of course, there was a massive pump yesterday, but the resistance across the board has not been broken yet. Of course, on the smaller time frames, we broke out of the local downtrend, but now it becomes key to identify whether we see a breakout, at least on the daily chart and above then. And yeah, guys, of course, at this point, I have to mention that this is not financial advice, only for educational purpose, and hopefully you get some entertainment out of it as well. And yeah, always do your own research. I'm happy to be here to help you guys out to identify key levels. But yeah, like I said, always do your own research, consider different opinions. And then if you find alignment between these opinions, then you're probably in a good spot to make a decision. I'll be back later on X. So another reminder here, follow me over there, @crypto. I'll be updating you guys on Bitcoin dominance. I'll post a video there later. And yeah, guys, this is basically it for me for today for YouTube. And as always, happy trading and see you soon.